one of the things that's so important in M&A is momentum and sort of the feeling that this is a great company that you have to buy or else you're going to miss out. It's going to be the worst decision of your life. And again, that's why in a mini process, people feel like, oh, these guys we're honored just to be able to bid for you. In this case, it was the exact opposite.
Hey, what's up, agency owners? Jason Swenk here. While I'm coughing on a peanut, welcome to another episode of the Smart Agency Masterclasses podcast for the agency owner that wants to scale and grow their agency faster. On today's episode, we're going to talk about selling your agency, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the things to avoid. So let's go ahead and jump into the show. Hey, David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jason. Great to be here.
Yep. So tell us who you are, what you do.
So I am a digital marketer. I started in digital marketing in 2000, back when it was kind of not a thing, and sort of glammed onto the world of search engine marketing very early on. I worked at a series of startups in Silicon Valley, which is where I live, for about 8 years. And then I was at a company where, well, the culture was not one that I agreed with. The company had an F on the Better Business Bureau, which takes a lot of effort actually to get an F. I was traveling to India 3 times a year to manage a team, and my wife was pregnant. And it felt like, number one, being in India while your wife is going into labor is probably not a smart family decision. And I just wasn't happy with the company. So I quit and just sort of set up shop in a coffee house in Pacifica, California. And people started calling me and saying, hey, can you help me with your search engine marketing consulting? And I started an agency, and that agency today is 3Q Digital. And we're part of a bigger organization called Depth. But when we sold to Depth, we were at about 500 people, managing about $2.5 billion of media spend for our clients. There's a lot of ups and downs and bumps and M&A stories along the way, but that's the sort of the 2-minute elevator pitch.
Cool. And so what were some obstacles that you overcame or had to overcome looking back, going from maybe a couple employees to maybe 25 employees?
Yeah, that is a big inflection point. And actually, I tell people that it's harder to go from 2 people to 25 people than it is to go from 25 people to 100 people. You know, probably the couple things that I would say are, first of all, consistency of quality in terms of the people that you hire. I think it's relatively easy to manage and monitor people when you have 2 or 3 employees and make sure that they are doing a great job and they're the right people. The more people you hire, the more you have to delegate that responsibility, and the less you sort of know about how well your team is performing. So just constantly being obsessed with quality on the team. I think the other thing is process is really important. One of the things that I really learned early on is most agencies don't have much process. And so the result is when a client is onboarded, the success or failure of that client is basically based on the person that's assigned to that account. And the results are going to be totally different because everyone has their own ideas. So early on in the business, we said we need to create process first to be consistent, create consistency, because you can't have a brand without consistent results. It's like going to McDonald's and going to one McDonald's and the hamburger is 8 ounces and the next one is 3 pounds. That's an agency without process. And then we also wanted to enable our top people to sort of work on strategy instead of sort of reinventing the wheel every time. So we put a lot of process in. Some of that process we actually ended up releasing to the general public as marketing tools for us. But that was something that was very, very important early on. You can't scale unless you have consistency in process.
Break down a little bit more about why do you feel it's harder to manage an agency or manage people around the 2 to 5 mark rather than 25 mark? Because there's a lot of agency owners listening right now that may have under 25 people, and they literally say to us, they'll be like, I do not want to get to 25 or more because I already am at my max. I can't manage anybody else.
Well, I mean, no individual can manage hundreds of people. That's clear. I mean, I think a lot of studies say that the maximum number of reports a manager has is like 6. And that kind of makes sense because you can only dedicate so many hours every week to checking in with team members, reviewing their work, et cetera. So the challenge at 25, as I said, is it's partly just having consistency but it's also delegation. It's about finding those people on your team who you feel are true leaders and up-leveling them and giving them responsibility and letting go of the steering wheel a little bit. There's no great secret to it, except that you have to sort of really have A players hiring A players. I mean, I will say that I had a team member that I promoted, and there were some people on his team that weren't A players. And this guy was a former professional soccer player. And I said to him, I said, well, why do you have B players on the team? He said, well, they're good people. Clients seem to like them more or less. And I say, well, let me ask you this from a soccer perspective. If you have a soccer team, you have 8 A players and 3 B players on the field, what happens? And he said, well, the A players end up having to play the B players' positions because they don't trust them. And I said, exactly. That's why as you scale a business, you can never let B players on the team, because then those B players will hire C players and D players, and it all goes downhill. So people you trust and consistency are really important.
Yeah. Let's talk about the process when you were going through and selling the first agency. What led you to wanting to sell the agency?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't actually like planning on selling it, but as with, I think, many agency founders, I started getting a lot of inbound emails from potential acquirers. And again, I didn't want to sell, but what I did was I hired an investment banker, and I figured I'm just going to hire this guy. He can take all the inbound leads. And at some point, if there's enough interest, maybe we'll just sort of put our toe in the water and see what happens. And so he screened all of these inbound leads. Some of them were legitimate acquirers. Others were basically spammers looking to, convince an agency owner to sell for 10% of value. And eventually we got to the point where we had 6 or 7 really legitimate buyers who wanted to buy the company. And so what I said, let's do what I call the mini process. So in the M&A world, a process is when you mail out 50 letters to potential acquirers, and you hope that 15 respond and 10 take a meeting with you and you get 8 offers. And that can work really well. But the problem with a process is it can look kind of desperate. And, someone once said that great companies are bought, not sold. And so the beauty of doing a mini process where you're only talking to the people who have reached out to you is that they all think they're lucky just to be in the conversation. And you can legitimately say to them, hey, I wasn't for sale. You came to me. If you don't make me a great offer, I'll just walk. I'm happy doing my business. So that's kind of the approach that we took to that first sale. And we got 3 great offers, but we got one offer that was substantially better than the other 2. And it turns out there's a company called Hart Hanks, which is a publicly traded company down in Texas. And they had been saying on their earnings calls that they were going to get into the digital marketing space. And they had tried to acquire a couple of agencies and they hadn't been successful. And so they were getting a little bit nervous because they kept making these promises to the analysts on the calls. So we were thinking that we'd get offers in the sort of $40-45 million range at that point. They came in with an offer of $65 million, which was way above what we expected. And I like the CEO, and I like the whole concept of they're an offline business, we're an online business. It's going to be, I was thinking it's peanut butter meets chocolate, which creates a Reese's peanut butter cup, right? So we took that offer. We the deal terms were $30 million in cash and $35 million in an earnout over 3 years. And we thought it was fair terms, good CEO, and we were excited. And I'm happy to tell you what happened next. That's sort of the top of the mountain on that one.
Well, let's talk about what was your EBITDA at the time?
So our EBITDA was actually not amazing. It was about, I think it was about $2 million. However, as you'll hear people talk in the M&A space, there's a concept of adjusted EBITDA, which is when you can remove sort of special events like, oh, well, I paid $500,000 for an attorney last year to prepare for the sale. That doesn't count. So we ended up sort of representing to buyers that our EBITDA was somewhere in the range of, I think, about $3 million when you added in all of the EBITDA adjustments.
Okay. So what was the multiples of the other companies?
The other companies kind of came in where we thought they would be. We thought they would be in the sort of $35-40 million range.
So around the 10x.
So call it 10, 12, 13 times multiples, which still were pretty high for that EBITDA amount. But
still very, very high. Yeah. I mean, especially now, what I've been seeing, I tell people there's certain thresholds. If you can get over the million in EBITDA, it's around 4 to 6, maybe. If you can get over the 3 million in EBITDA, it's usually around 8 to 10, maybe. And then you get over the 8-figure mark, then, the numbers jump up to kind of the numbers that you were talking about. So you get this one amazing offer. You like the CEO. Walk us through the process of selling, because what I liked you put in, like especially the being able to buy back the agency if they didn't meet terms, because I think that's really important to put in there that, I wish I had that opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, what we really did in the process, because there was such a large amount of money on the earnout, and I think, Jason, maybe as you know, maybe from personal experience, the number one cause of litigation in any M&A deal is the earnout. And there's lots of ways that can go wrong. So what we said to them is said, look, until you pay us our earnout, we need to be 100% independent. So we own finance. We're not merging finance teams. We own the sales process. We decide who we're going to take on as clients and which clients we're going to fire. We decide who we hire and fire on the employment side. Everything is in our control. The moment that earnout is paid, you can do whatever you want with us. You can turn us into a SeaWorld exhibit for all I care. It's the earnout that we're concerned about. So that's what we did. And I will say that the CEO during the negotiation said, he was pushing back on this, and he said, David, you got to trust me. I love you guys. I'm going to take care of you.
Never.
And I said, and I'm Jewish, so I can say this joke. I said, as my rabbi said, trust in Allah, but watch your camels. And I said, look, I trust you. You're a wonderful guy, but you may not be here tomorrow. They may decide to fire you. And foreshadowing, that's what happened. And someone else had to come in and they're going to look at the contract and say, look, I don't see anything that says, I have to protect your earnout. So that was a really important clause for us. And it was a deal breaker if we didn't get it, but we got it. And it became very important.
Well, it's really smart because, what I've told people in the past when I've coached them through this process is like, look, be happy with the cash you get up front, because as soon as they take over, you have no control. They can do anything. But I like that stipulation that you put that in there. It's very, very, very smart. So, okay. So you get that clause in there. When did you decide to kind of, like, they weren't going to fulfill their contract of the earnout? So what happened next?
Yeah. So, first of all, about 6 months after we sold, they had their first unprofitable quarter in 10 years. They fired their CEO. New CEO comes in, and I should mention that our earnout was a little unusual because it was a revenue-based earnout, and I think most of your clients and mastermind members will know that most earnouts are based on an EBITDA goal. Ours was a revenue-based earnout. What they said to us, they said, you get the $35 million if you double the business in 3 years. So we were at about, I think, $17 million of revenue. We had to get to $35 million in 3 years. So they probably thought there's no way these guys are going to.
Does that count for revenue spend, or media spend?
No, just pure billings. No, definitely no pass through. Pure billings. We needed to get to 35 million. And I don't think they thought we were going to get that number. But after about a year and a half, it became clear that we were on track to do it. And I think given the sort of some of the challenges that they had in the business, they just were not in a position to really commit that much money, the $35 million. So we went through a couple different rounds of discussions. We did give them an extension on paying us some of the money. That didn't really work. And eventually we just said, look, you guys have to sell us. That's the only way you're going to pay us back this money. So we set up another process. And this time I wasn't as in control. So I would say that our acquirer hired a second-rate investment bank who put their third-rate team on the account. And we didn't get any credible offers. I think, one of the things that's so important in M&A is momentum and sort of the feeling that this is a great company that you have to buy or else you're going to miss out. It's going to be the worst decision of your life. And again, that's why in a mini process, people feel like, oh, these guys we're honored just to be able to bid for you. In this case, it was the exact opposite. There was our parent company was having struggles that were publicly known. They had only owned us for 2 years, and now they're selling the business. And so I think buyers were like suspicious that something must be wrong here. As I would say, there's hair in the deal. So we didn't get a single credible offer. And I even went and I flew around the country to two of my most direct competitors, because I always believe in co-opetition. I know all my other players in the space. And I flew to their offices and I said, look, for $45 million, you can buy this company. I can show you what the EBITDA trend looks like. This company is going to be worth 2 times that in less than a year. I could not get them to bid. So we had no bids, and I was owed $35 million. So what I ended up doing is I went to a local bank and I asked for a loan based on the business, which I got. They gave me a $5 million loan. And I proposed to Hart Hanks, I'll give you $5 million in cash right now. I'll give you $5 million in cash if we ever sell the company again. And I'll remove the $35 million obligation that you owe to us as founders. They agreed. And so we bought the company back. And so we thought we were going to be independent forever. That didn't also work out the way we planned either, but that's what happened.
And so, but you got to keep the 30 million of cash that they gave you.
Yes, that was ours. So you could say that we sold for 65 and we bought it back for 45, basically, is what it amounted to.
And so why would you go to a bank? I'm just curious. I know some listeners are going to listen, like, why would you go to a bank for the 5 million and not just use kind of some of the existing cash that they gave to you? Or did it kind of diverse to the whole company?
Yeah, I mean, there were other founders other than myself, so we would have had to sort of go around with a collection basket and get everyone to put their money in. But also, it's just a matter of it was just frankly easier. I mean, use someone else's money to buy the company back. It's essentially, I mean, the amount we paid on that, the debt service we paid on that $5 million was very small because we only ended up holding the company for about 8 or 9 months. So we probably ended up paying, I don't know, $75,000 to $100,000 to buy the company back with someone else's money.
Okay. How many founders were in the agency with you, and did they stay?
We had a couple different. I did acquire a smaller agency in 2014, and so that came with 5 founders. Originally, I founded it with one other founder. He left after my founder left it after the first deal, as did one of the other founders from the company we acquired. When all was said and done, when we took the company back from Hart Hanks, I think we had 4 of 7 founders still with the company.
I gotcha. And then walk us through kind of 8 months later when you were like, well, let's sell, or were you approached by people, or walk us through?
So it was the exact same situation as before, basically. We were scaling the business. We went from, I think we were at about 250 employees. When we took the company back from Hart Hanks, we were at about 350 employees about 9 months later. Importantly, because we were on a revenue-based earnout at Hart Hanks, which is not really very relevant for future M&A goals, we switched to an EBITDA focus. So even though our revenue went up about 25%, but our EBITDA went up by about 250% in about 8 months, just by being efficient and sort of.
What did the EBITDA go up to?
We went from about 3 million of EBITDA to about 8.5 million of EBITDA, I think, is where we were when we sold. But the same thing as before, we had 6 or 7 buyers. We talked to all of them. They were all very excited. It came down to 2 buyers with pretty different offers. One was a private equity companies, and then the other one was a holding company that everyone would have heard of, that was offering us a standard holding company deal, which was cash with a 3 to 4 year performance-based earnout. And I was actually on the 1 yard line with the holding company, and I decided to do a reference check. And I had called a friend of mine who had sold to that exact company, and his comment to me was, they're very revenue focused, and they believe that training is not important because it doesn't drive revenue. And so I was like, this is not the right cultural fit for our business. So I said no to that. And I signed up to do business with these 2 private equity companies out of Chicago for a traditional private equity deal, which again was about mostly cash and partly a rollover.
So what was kind of the multiple on the 8?
It's not public, but it was I would say that typically speaking, at that range, what I've experienced is that it's usually 8 to 12 is the multiple range. During COVID, I would tell people 15 to 20 is the new 8 to 12, but we're back down to the 8 to 12 range these days. Yeah, so that was the range it was in.
Yeah, nothing like the first one where it was like wow, like that was the dumbest buyer ever. I was like,
I mean, they got a great agency out of it. They paid top dollar.
Correct, but that was a huge multiple, like literally more than anybody else, but there's a reason why they went out. But with the new deal, did you have the same thing of going, hey, we're going to get most of the cash up front until the earnout is paid, we control our destiny?
Basically, I mean, so first of all, because it's private equity, it was a rollover, not an earnout. So, a rollover essentially is just that you get stock in the newly formed company. And so you have an incentive to stick around because now a percentage of the money that we're paying you in cash is now in equity. One of the phrases that I coined, I probably didn't coin it, but in my brain I coined it, was the more you roll, the more you control. And so we had a lot of debates with the private equity company about how much they wanted us to roll versus cash. And it all was related to sort of the amount of control that they had. And this was the first time in any transaction where I was sort of the minority shareholder now. And so I was very nervous at being a minority that, they were going to buy the company and a day later they were going to create some draconian laws that screwed over me and my other founders. So we had a lot of negotiations around, all right, fine, I will I'll take more equity going forward, but you have to give me this contractual clause, something like that. So it was different than the earnout experience, but it was ultimately the same thing. It's like making sure that you're protected after the deal gets done, because people are very nice during the M&A process, but afterwards it's the contract that speaks. It doesn't matter how nice or what they promised you. It's all about the contract.
Yeah, it's kind of like goes back to the movie I watched called The Founder, which is the founder of McDonald's, or really wasn't the founder of McDonald's. And he was like, "Oh, we can't put that in, and we'll give you your, this, which would have been worth billions." And they just didn't have it in the contract. And I think he was out to screw him the whole time anyway. But
I think that as a general rule, whatever negotiation point you're talking about, the answer is always get it in writing.
Big time. Like when I sold the first company, like it was a performance model on a certain date, which I never like anyway, because then they can throttle that. And, we also had a stipulation in there, if they sold again, it would speed up that process. And so they sold 2 days outside of our window, and then it just royally screwed us. And we're like, really? Like, when there's money to be, had, people mostly will choose money. It changes them too.
You see a different side of people. I mean, I had this even with people inside the company. I mean, I had a lot of people coming up to me who knew about one of these sales, saying like, I deserve 3 times as much equity, or I was responsible for 40% of the company's success. I need money now. It's like, sorry, but that's not the way things work. I think that one of my lessons in all M&A is there's all you can do is work with people you trust and hire the best lawyers you can. And, I think sometimes agency founders may feel like, oh, I was stupid. How didn't I see this coming? And it's like, you can't anticipate everything, but you have to do your best to make a judgment call on the people who are buying you. If you think they're going to be good-natured folks, but as you said, when money gets involved, even good-natured folks are going to sometimes make decisions that aren't the most ethical ones. And that's why you need really good lawyers. And you need to say, no, I want that in writing. I want to be very explicit. I'm going to look at every corner case. And that's, if you don't do that, I'm not selling the business.
Awesome. Well, great advice. What's the title of the book that you wrote?
The book is called, very literal title is called Selling Your Marketing Agency. So
I don't know how you ever came up with that.
Yeah. It was either that or Gunga Din, but that was taken. So I went with Selling Your Marketing Agency. Yeah.
There you go.
It's on Amazon. It's currently in Kindle and paperback, but someday maybe an audiobook.
Okay. Awesome. Well, everyone go check out the book. Thanks so much, David, for coming on the show. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you share it out with another agency owner. And we just launched a new masterclass that I want all of you to go check out. Make sure you go to agencymastery360.com/convert and go check it out. And until next time, have a swank day.